During March month every year, the Tibetans commemorate anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising when Tibetans took to the streets of Lhasa, Tibet's capital, to protest China's illegal invasion and occupation of their homeland. Despite ongoing pandemic and lockdown, Tibetans in Toronto recognized this day through virtual events and a car caravan protest last week. The virtual event included words of support across party lines from NDP MPP Butila Karpushe, Liberal MP R. Virani, City Councillor God Perks, the Honourable Nagu Tham He, and the Honourable Consiglio Di Nino. They also had Gloria Fung from Canada, Hong Kong Ling, Shengji from the Federation of the Democratic China, and Zumriteri Arkin from World Uyghur Congress in solidarity with the Tibetan movement. There were two panel discussions in Tibetan and English titled Tibetan National Uprising Day, 62nd Years of Struggles, Challenges and the Way Forward, with prominent Tibetan and allied activists as well as former elected officials of the Central Tibetan Administration. They also arranged a car rally protest in Chinatown, Toronto, which were organized by coalition includes Canadian Tibetan Association of Ontario, Students for a Free Tibet Canada, Tibetan Women's Association of Ontario, Canada Dokham, Chushi, Gangrok, and Regional Tibetan Youth Congress. I'm joined with Yudon Samsung from Students for a Free Tibet Canada. Welcome, Yudon. We really appreciate for your time. First of all, we would like to know, tell our viewers about the Tibetan National Uprising Day.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me to here. I really appreciate it. So Tibetan National Uprising Day is March 10th, 1959. That was when the Chinese government, and the Chinese military were in Lhasa, which is the capital city of Tibet. Tens of thousands of Tibetans rose up. They surrounded the Potala Palace, which is the home of the Dalai Lama, and they wanted to protect him and also fight against the occupation of Tibet. There was open fire from the Chinese military. Tens of thousands of Tibetans lost their lives. And what ensued was the Dalai Lama, who was very young at the time, having to escape Tibet and having to, escape to India. And after that, hundreds of thousands of Tibetans followed him, and, India became a home away from home for many Tibetans following March 10, 1959. Since then, we commemorate it every single year, and it happens globally with Tibetans and supporters around the world.
So recently, Tibetan-Canadians commemorated 62nd anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising Day and called upon action from the Canadian government. What sort of action you anticipate from Canadian government?
Yes. Every single time that we have any kinds of protests, we try to engage our Canadian government. We want them to, be on the forefront, be the leaders in multilateral action, to call on, the Chinese government to stop its oppression of Tibetans and to give us human rights inside Tibet. With March 10th, we were able to get statements from, Aaron O'Toole, who's the Conservative leader, as well as Jagmeet Singh, who's the NDP leader. They, wrote statements to recognize the Tibetan National Uprising Day and in support of our movement. So those are some kinds of actions from our MPs, our political leaders that we anticipate.
So what kind of response you received from Canadian government this year?
This year, we had MPs speak at our event virtually, as well as put out statements supporting and recognizing Tibetan National Uprising Day.
So the Tibetan Coalition in Canada called upon the Canadian government to legislate a bill equivalent to the U.S. Tibetan Policy and Support Act 2020. You also asked the Canadian government to stand by the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhist community's wishes to be in charge of the Dalai Lama's reincarnation process, and that Chinese officials who interfere in the process should face tough sanctions. What do you get response from current Canadian government?
So, since the 1970s, when Tibetans first immigrated to Canada, we've always had incremental support from the Canadian government. We've had, prime ministers meet the Dalai Lama. We've had, more immigration of Tibetans. Uh, you know, um, we've had MPs call upon the Chinese government to engage in meaningful dialogue with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's representatives and the Central Tibetan Administration. We've had the creation of Special Committee of Canada-China Relations, which allows for Tibetan activists to speak there and speak with MPs to engage in meaningful activism for Tibet. However, I want to say that with all of this in mind, we've had very little movement, nothing as substantial as the Tibetan Policy and Support Act from the U.S., for example. Reciprocal access to Tibet passed in the U.S. in 2018. We have not seen any movement of that in Canada. Reciprocal access, for example, calls on Chinese officials that deny American citizens visa to China, that they should not have visa to America. It's on the basis of reciprocity and mutual respect. But that should be the same for Canadians. If Canadian citizens want to visit Tibet, but Chinese officials stop us, that means that they shouldn't be allowed to Canada as well. So that's reciprocal access to Tibet, and that's something that we've not seen any movement on. And in terms of the Tibetan Policy and Support Act, that's a big step that the American government has taken, the U.S. government, and we want to see something like that in Canada. Tibetan Canadians deserve that, and it's on the basis of human rights violations that are happening in Tibet. It's on the basis of the Tibetan struggle for the last 62 years. So it's unfair that we don't have those tools. We're very happy that the Dalai Lama, for example, is a Canadian an honorary Canadian citizen, and that was in 2006. And he's only the third person to be an honorary Canadian citizen, and that's a very meaningful symbolic gesture. But we want to see more action and more tougher stance on China, especially when I feel like it is definitely a election item for a lot of voters. For example, if that's something that's important to Canadian politicians, the Conservatives, the NDP, they have all stood up and called on different measures of support. But the current administration, the Liberal government, has not. They've stood by on a lot of these calls to action. So we want to see more of that. Especially, I think it's high time now that it's been 60 odd years.
This year, you also wanted to see action from Canada on environment protection of the Tibetan Plateau, implementation of reciprocal access to Tibet, establishing a Canadian consulate in Tibet, and acknowledging the role of Central Tibetan Administration. How did Canadian government respond?
So, there are very few countries in the world that recognize the Central Tibetan Administration, and sadly, Canada is not one of them. They have, they don't recognize Central Tibetan Administration as the government in exile, but we do. It is a fair, democratic way that we've elected those people to represent us and our interests. So they are, a legitimate group for the Tibetan people, but they are not for the Canadian government. In terms of environment, I think it's important to note that Tibet is considered the third pole of the world. The water that flows down the Tibetan Plateau, it goes to 1/3 of the world's population, including India, and with any kinds of implication on that from climate change is one thing, but the other thing is China is actively building dams to divert waters to, and they're actually causing droughts on downstream countries, many in the Southeast Asia, for example. So they're using Tibetan water as a way to control and to sort of oppress other countries. The other important thing to note is also that the nomads, Tibetans, 1/3 of Tibetans inside Tibet are nomads, which means they sort of graze the land. They have animals. They are the real keepers of the land of Tibet, and the grasslands really contribute to mitigating climate change. the bad things that happen from climate change, right? So the fact that, nomads are being put into these residential houses with nothing around them, that they're being taken off the land so that the Chinese government can use the land for their own purposes, like mining, really, really hurts the environment. And climate, as you know, is not within just a boundary of political, geographical location. It affects the whole globe. It affects everyone. So Tibet and climate issues in Tibet affects all of us globally. So we have to recognize it and act on it.
So how did Canadian governments in the past help Tibetan Canadians in their struggle for free Tibet?
As I've been saying, unfortunately, there's very little. We recognize that like the conservative leaders and the NDP leaders, they are speaking out on it, and we appreciate that. But we haven't seen any strong bills. Like, there has been support from individual MPs like Garnet Janice or Senator Tan Hai Ngo, that bring these bills to the floor or to the Special Committee on Canada-China Relations, and we appreciate those. But we haven't yet seen a bill pass where we could meaningfully address the Tibetan struggle, and we're hopeful that it'll come soon, and that we will keep pushing on it, and especially with the support of our allies across Hong Kong, Uyghur, Chinese Canadians that want democracy in China, the Indian diaspora here. So with all of the support from our coalitions, we are hopeful that we will see some real movement on Tibet.
So India has always been a front line to help Tibet cause. What are your expectations, your group's expectations from Indo-Canadians in terms of seeking their support and help?
So definitely, India has been on the front line to support Tibet for many, many decades now. I and both my parents were actually born in India. I was born in Dharamsala, so I know the importance of, for me, for example, if I say I'm going back home, for someone who's never been to Tibet, for me, back home is India. So I definitely recognize, that Indians have been on the front line, helping Tibetans. But at the same time, I do want to, also shine the light on, the Special Frontier Force, I believe, which has a lot of Tibetans that, fight on the Indian borders, and many Tibetan Jawans have lost their life fighting for India. And I think, these people and the soldiers that are fighting on the front lines are also a metaphor for Tibet itself. Tibet itself is, geographically so significant. The fact that we are, between China and India, the fact that that we want, I think our security is also India's security. And also I want to recognize that China is surrounding India with their Belt and Road Initiative, right? With Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, even Burma now, Afghanistan. So they are providing, investments for basic infrastructure, but really, changing the political climate there and controlling the political climate there. And so I believe that, Tibetans, with our struggle and our freedom and our independence, also comes a sense of security for India, because it's not just based on political, diplomacy. It's also based on the fact that we have so much shared culture and shared trust, and years of friendship. So I think that is really important in having that sort of sense of security for India as well.
So how's Students for a Free Tibet Canada working to create Tibet situation awareness across Canadian campuses?
Well, it's sad to say, but there's many people in the world, many Canadians who still don't know what Tibet is, right? I will walk in the street and I'll say, I'm here from Students for Free Tibet Canada. And they're like, free who? Free what? Right? What is Tibet? So there are some people that are still out there that are like that. And so, what better place than university campuses and college campuses to educate and raise awareness about Tibet? There are young minds that are willing to soak and willing to learn, and also have this optimism and a sense of justice. So, college and university campuses are a great place for movements to start, and young people are at the forefront of a lot of movements. The other thing is, college and university campuses also allow for us to really collaborate with different kinds of interest groups and different kinds of people that are also looking to better the world and fight for human rights across, different nations and different territories. So for us, having that kind of coalition and support and networking is also really important, and college and university really, contribute to that.
So how would you like to conclude our discussion in the end?
I think I really wanted to conclude on the note that Tibetans and Indians, we must stand in solidarity with each other. We've had students for Free Tibet Canada, many interns and members that were of Indian origin, Indian Canadians, and there's that solidarity there that's so important to cultivate and to keep. I would really like to see more collaboration between our groups and more ways to hold China accountable and to better just the world through human rights activism.
Thank you very much, Yudon Samusang. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that we'll be able to take your comments in future as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to hear.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Viewers, you just heard the views of Yudon Samsung from Students for a Free Tibet Canada. Thank you for watching Candid Talk with Tahir Gora at TAG TV.
Subscribe TAG TV YouTube channel and press the notification button.